Hi Sagittarius Sun and Rising. Welcome to a video on the transits of Saturn and Neptune into Aries in 2025 and beyond. It's Raina here. Long intro. And I am a Sun in Sagittarius myself. So when you're listening to stuff that has to do, predictive types of videos on YouTube, keep in mind that your sun and your rising sign will likely be completely different signs, and therefore the charts that are referenced, and of course it's going to be a general thing when you're listening or watching to an impersonal reading online, they could be completely different. They will very likely be completely different. And the natal chart is a very important thing. So even though I'm a sun in Sagittarius, I have Taurus rising, and I make sure to listen to Taurus forecasts. I don't listen to many astrologers anymore, but when I do, I'm very clear on doing that. So there might be some of you out there who are sun in Sagittarius who assume that that is the main thing. It's like, no, you have to find out your rising sign, and that involves knowing your exact time of birth. And there are free ways you can generate your own chart. You can certainly get a reading from me because I do transit readings, I do chart analysis readings, and you can, after this video, you can click on the link below to find out more information about that, because I'm not even going to try to get cute and do the different versions of it that make it a little bit more specific depending on your degree of ascendant or sun sign. I'm not even going to try that because I'm one of those people, I get kind of confused with those things and I might give the wrong information. So I'm just keeping it very general. And so anyway, what we're looking at here with the sign of Aries, and why you may have heard astrologers make such a big deal out of this, is because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So we have these two planets, and I was surprised. I do think I read somewhere that Saturn is considered an outer planet because it's not personal. It has a almost 3-year transit through each sign. So it's not very personal to us based on our date of birth. There are people within a few years span that are going to have the same Saturn as you. But it's not a generational planet either, so it's kind of in between. But it is, several years that you're going to have it in Aries. And actually this year, both of these planets are going to go back into Pisces for the last time. I'm pretty sure it's the last time for Neptune. And this means that we're going to have like a little bit of that fourth house stuff happening. And then in 2026, after both of these planets go direct, they will move forward in Aries for good for this particular cycle. And the 12th house is a house of endings because it's the last house. So that kind of symbolism shouldn't be lost on anyone either, because it is a very big deal in that regard. And for Sagittarius, sun and rising signs, the 4th house is the house of your home. And so that could be something that is up in the air, or in the process. I shouldn't say up in the air, but it kind of is, because when it goes back into Pisces and it goes back into that 4th house, it can indicate that something is not quite settled with moving forward. Aries, the first sign, is really about forward movement. And so we're letting go of this energy in the 4th house, which is very, 4th house energy squares us, 5th house energy trines us. And that makes all the difference in the world. And not to say we shouldn't be challenged by stuff that squares off to us. But it is, if you want to look at it as being pleasant or more easier to manifest, then for sure when Neptune and Saturn go into that fifth, it's going to make it a lot easier. And Saturn is already a planet that's a little bit difficult to begin with. So any kind of friendly angle, our sun or ascendant mixed to Saturn is a treat compared to what it might have been when it was in the fourth house, and some of the emotions that have come up for you, or some of the things in your domestic situation that felt kind of burdensome. So let's start with Neptune, since Neptune is the first one to go into Aries. Neptune will be going into Aries on March 30th. I'm assuming this is true for everyone in the world, but I live in the central time zone. So if you live overseas from the United States, like in Europe and the southern hemisphere down under, it might be in some cases the next day, but it's in that general vicinity. And so this is the fifth house for Sagittarius. The fifth house is a great house. It's a fire house. In the universal template of the astrological chart, the fifth house is represented by Leo. And of course, Leo is a fire sign, and it deals with creativity, romance, love. We could say love and romance are not necessarily synonymous terms. Love can be, you could have love with somebody you've been married to for 50 years, and that kind of goes through its own phases, and that could be represented by the fifth house. And romance to me is somebody that you're dating, that you're romantically interested in. You could have romance with your significant other, I suppose, but I just typically think of it as a dating scene, because that's what the fifth house can be. Fifth house can be children. It can be the business that you own. So when Neptune is here, it adds a touch of the divine to this area. If you are single, and I hate to say this, but even if you're married, you could meet your soulmate. Neptune rules the 12th house of past lives. The 12th house is a house of past lives, spiritual realms, and karma. So when we think of soulmate, it can be somebody that you have spent many lifetimes with. There's a term, karmic contracts. I don't know if that applies to soulmates, because a contract sounds like it's an obligation or something. Doesn't sound very romantic like I typically think of with soulmates. But anyway, just wanted to say that. And Neptune, because it's so otherworldly, it can, when it's in the fifth house, it can really imbue your artistic creations with something very special. Maybe it's something that people can't put their finger on, but it's very bewitching, and it takes people in. So whatever the medium you use for your art, it can have a touch of the divine added to it. And one thing I do want to say, because I was talking about romance, is that you have to be careful when Neptune is in the fifth house if you're somebody who plans on dating, because you will very likely want to vet any person that you get involved with. Now, that sounds like a no-brainer for anybody, doesn't it? But especially at this time, because Neptune can bring, I was going to say negative, that's not what I meant, deceptive people into your life. And you know how they say you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince? Well, you might find that the frogs are a good thing compared to what you might attract sometimes, because it can get kind of gnarly. So part of it is that you're under this spell with Neptune being in the romance sector, where you might feel like nothing is truly affecting you, and it's kind of like being intoxicated. Actually, Neptune rules drugs, so you might feel like you're under the influence and you're just completely avoiding anything that smacks of realism or reality in terms of your dating, and you just want to indulge in fantasy. And that, that could not end well, obviously, because that can be something that is very foolhardy. So pay attention to what is going on with your love life and the kind of people you're meeting. Also, people who are addicts, because Neptune can also give you this compassion for others that you're dating too. Like, you might have a lot of empathy, but even as an empath, you have to practice discernment, or you will go down with the ship, so to speak. You might meet somebody important who is a Pisces. Oh, and I think the 5th house is your firstborn child. Maybe you'll have a Pisces who's a very sensitive artist and very psychic. Maybe you could have one of those kinds of children. And you might even start like a spiritual business or an artistic business during this time. And that brings me to Saturn, because thank goodness for Saturn. Saturn will be here for the first 2+ years in this area. Like I said, it is going to go back in. Both of these are going back into the 4th house. And that means that we're going to have one last respite in the former sign, and then we're going to have it move forward in Aries again in 2026. And when that happens, for the first few years, you're going to have Saturn with Neptune. Now, Saturn is a faster moving planet, obviously, so they're not going to be in conjunction for very long. Saturn will easily get out ahead of Neptune. But just being in the same domain is everything, because actually, I don't think I would want Saturn in conjunction with Neptune. I would rather just have it hanging around in that 5th house, because if it was actually in conjunction with Neptune, it might dampen any kind of fantasy, which can, in this case, it might mean creative ideas that are flowing with us and stuff like that. Saturn is all about discipline. It's the ruler of the 10th house of career in the sign of Capricorn. So, and it does, I mean, you can say it's the co-ruler of Aquarius in the 11th house, but typically we associate it with the 10th house in Capricorn because of the nature of Saturn, the nature of the 10th house. The 10th is the house of career and your reputation, your status, like what you have attained thus far in life. And so when Saturn has that kind of ambitious energy behind it, and it's very organized, it's very disciplined. that is helpful when, let's say, you're an artist, but you can't get it together. It's very hard for you to be consistent. And, or maybe because you might have an artistic goal, but you just can't get it together. And also, Saturn can be about realism. So when you're romantic, you can throw realism out the window and act like it doesn't even matter. It's not relevant to your particular situation. But when you can look at what you're dealing with in your life and see it for what it is, that can be very liberating, because honestly, even though Neptune can be fun because it can be escapism and a person can be taken from their everyday reality, it can lead to deluded tendencies to believe something that simply isn't true because you want to believe it, to do things that are not going to get you where you want to go because you are choosing to turn your back on the truth of the situation. And this is the area of love and artistic endeavors. So I'm speaking specifically about those kinds of things. Saturn can be a reality check. So the person who thinks that they are going to be the next big movie star or pop idol, and maybe they don't have what it takes. I mean, that's kind of a negative example, but Neptune can delude people into something with creativity or add to their delusions of grandeur that a person already has. And Saturn is the reality check, the voice of reason. But it can be, Saturn can be pessimistic, so it's a little bit tricky. But since Neptune is so idealistic, it's a balance, I guess. And so another thing that the fifth house really is about is fun activities in general. This is a house of pleasure. When Saturn is here, you're not as interested in that. It's not to say that for the rest of your life you won't be, but for this particular time period. And maybe it has something to do with a passion project that you're trying to complete. And you realize that some of these things that, Sagittarius love to have fun, that you want to do, that they are serving as distractions, and you have to keep your eyes on the prize. So Saturn can give you that discipline to do, let's say you're an artist, to be consistent with your art so that you're more likely to be able to, first of all, have enough of I don't know what they call when you have a collection of art, but I could say like a backlog, so that you're able to sell it, for instance, or to set up some kind of infrastructure where you're getting paid for your art, and it's because you were able to create something that gives you maybe it's like a passive income or something like that, and you're able to concentrate on your creative projects because you don't have to worry about working overtime and doing things like that. If you're single, the fifth house, when Saturn is in this fifth house, you can be taking love very seriously. Typically, Sagittarians are the type to enjoy dating because maybe it's an adventure, or it's something very expansive. But anything that is deemed frivolous, because the fifth house, it could be sports, any kind of thing that you find enjoyable to do on your off hours, not so much now, because you are very serious about finding love and cementing your income streams. Oh, well, I said cementing your income streams because I was jumping ahead of myself. It's really about cementing your artistic output and things of that nature, but it could involve anything that involves getting organized and setting things up so that you can operate at the highest level. Saturn is the lord of karma, so these two planets, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you within the duration of this transit, or, I guess I would have to talk about the Neptune one because the Saturn one will be over in a few years, but let's say when they're both together like that, that could be a time when you meet the person who is meant for you. Alrighty then, that's what I have for you, Sagittarius. I hope that you enjoyed this and are looking forward to having these trines from your sun or ascendant to Neptune and Saturn. I think you can make some real inroads as a creative person and really monetize your art. And I just want to make it clear that I'm not one of those people that thinks that you have to monetize everything. And, the fifth house can be just your hobbies. You don't have to, you can do things just for the sake of doing them. It's just that at this time, Saturn can really make you take yourself seriously when it comes to these things that you're doing. And that involves perhaps believing in yourself enough to say, this is what I want to do as my life's work. And I believe in myself. I think I'm damn good. And I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to be consistent. I'm not just going to, get a little burst of energy and create one day and then take off for a week. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to take love seriously. I'm not just going to have little flings which have no promise of anything permanent, and then just kind of go from one situation to the other, and it never being anything that lasts very long. I mean, hopefully this is happening at a time when you're totally free, not when you've just gotten divorced and now you're serious about wanting a relationship, because I think it's always good to have that kind of time to decompress and things like that. So in any case, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, I have different types of readings. You can check the link below. Thanks for listening. Bye.